Welcome back for the second part of our 1 Corinthians 11 to 14 review. I've deliberately divided this review into two sessions because the hot topics and the arguments about detail can so easily drown out the main message of the chapters. And these chapters, they say that we should do church for the benefit of other Christians. We should do church for the benefit of other Christians. If you hate the phrase do church, let me rephrase for you. Our attitude in going to church, our behaviour when we get there, what we eat and drink at church, how we speak, what we wear, what we do in church meetings, how we express our gifts, how we think about our brothers and sisters, all of that should be entirely for their good instead of mine. And the reason this message gets drowned out as well, the other reason, is that we all think we believe it already and that there is nothing radical here that needs to change. And what I'm hoping is that that's what we'll speak about together in our groups. What is there in our life together that is good and needs to be strengthened and reinforced? And also, what is there that needs to go further or change? Now, I'll take us through the points on the handout before handing over to your group leaders. So first of all, a word about why it was hard for the Corinthians. You may remember that we've said all along their problem is pride, but not just pride based in insecurity. They're insecure, so they boast and they puff themselves up. And the world around them is very interested in status, in wealth, in wisdom, and in spiritual power. And by becoming Christians, they have put themselves at the very bottom of the heap. And that has made them desperate to reassert themselves, even at the expense of other Christians. And it also goes with their short horizon. They are entirely focused on their place in this age, in this world. And if any piece of Christian behaviour costs them something now, then it doesn't make sense to them. That's because they don't really have a sense that God's future is worth much, or worth as much as what they have now. Second, a word about how ugly it is. I think 1 Corinthians 11 verse 22 is perhaps the low point. What are they getting out of it? What are some Corinthians getting out of going to church? Well, it is a great place to humiliate those who are poorer than you. And the scene here, I can see it very easily, and I guess most of us have lived it in work or social settings with non-Christians. I think immediately of school prize day, where the rich people, they drove their enormous cars right up to the cricket pitch and set up enormous tents full of champagne where everyone could see them. And my mum and me, we climbed into her very battered Mini and drove away somewhere else to eat some sandwiches out of a plastic bag. And the value of church for them is as a place of display, a place to move up the pecking order, a place to feel better by squashing other people. And that is not unique to Corinth, sadly. In fact, it has been so well observed, so often observed by non-Christians, that it is standard to every film or TV script that features a group of Christians. And the ugliness, it is also clear in chapter 12. The effects of this selfishness and competitiveness means that some in the body think they would be better off without other Christians. Perhaps even they think their church would be more successful if those people would just move away. I have no need of you. And others, well, just imagine how it would feel to be anything less than spiritually excellent in Corinth in terms of worldly values. Others are left to conclude they don't really belong in this body because they don't have the gifts that Corinth values. And this attitude, it is the opposite of the gospel. It destroys the body that Jesus is trying to build. And 11 verse 17, it would be better to stay at home. And don't come back after coronavirus. Let's cancel the meetings of the church because they do more harm than good. Third then, what does Paul want them to do? And the big headline is go to church for the sake of other people. And that is about attitude, isn't it, mainly? Though it works out into practice, it's about how you think about other Christians. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honoured, all rejoice together. Love, which is patient and kind and does not insist on its own way. And this will apply very broadly. It's to what we pray about before we go to church. It's about how we behave when we're there. It will involve us deliberately setting out to do things that we find uncomfortable or that make us look lower in status if they will serve other people. We will speak to each other even if we find it hard, and we'll speak to any kind of person even if they don't make us feel or look good. We will be willing to use our gifts or not use them based on what will help other people, not based on what suits us and makes us look good. We'll relinquish roles and opportunities easily, and we'll rejoice when other people do them well. We'll be willing to have music that fits someone else's culture, even if we find it painful. We will restrict even the food we eat, the social events we organise, and the clothes we wear, if it will avoid status battles and signals, or it will serve the church and other Christians. And then second big area, this is about what we prioritise in our church meetings together. Chapter 14, as we've said, is about how much airtime tongues gets in the public meeting as opposed to prophecy. And the discussion, it illustrates just how radically he wants them to think about church for other people. So the tongue speaker stays silent completely in church meetings. And the prophet sits down and shuts up if it is someone else's turn. It's that radical. But the argument, it turns on a big principle that has very general application. It isn't simply that we go to church for the sake of other people. It is that we best love other people by radically prioritizing their edification, their being built up in the faith. So repeatedly in the argument, he says why prophecy is better than tongues. And it is because it more effectively builds people up, much more. So the content of church meetings, that is a very familiar battleground, isn't it? Churches routinely split over what music or how much or what architecture or what emotional experience, whether that's too much or too little. But here, Paul tells us what to put first, second, and third, and it is the building up of other Christians. And that's why at St Helens our music is not emphasised. It's why our meetings are focused on time in the Bible. It's why we insist on order and peace and quiet during sermons. It's why we run all our small groups around Bible passages and building each other up. And it's why we spend so much energy trying to train and raise up people to lead those groups. In fact, with this principle, churches that don't teach and build up, those are not loving churches. And ministers who are apparently very pastoral and loving, people say, but don't edify in the faith, they are in fact not pastoral, they're not feeding the sheep, and they're not loving. So this passage, it doesn't give us a Bible quick answer, how long a sermon should be or things like that, but it does give us a radical priority. And that impacts how we all behave at church. Ephesians 4 talks about every member of the body speaking the truth in love to one another. And that's not just one activity among many. It ought to be what we go to church for. One of the wonderful unintended effects of coronavirus has been that many more intentional conversations seem to be happening. Parents teaching Sunday school to their children. Christian friends putting a phone call in the diary so they can read the Bible and pray together. Central focus groups arranging a Zoom after the Sunday service so they can speak together about the sermon. We should pray urgently that those things survive the end of lockdown and in fact become far deeper once we can see each other again and do all those things more easily. And we may all do those things differently, based on our different personalities and gifts. You may be able to edify one person per Sunday, and you may prefer to do that in a thoughtful conversation that takes a long time. Others may be able to bounce around several people or speak to a group, but all of us, every member of the body, we go, and actually during the week as we email and ring and write to each other, we go for the benefit of others, and we put their building up ahead of everyone else. Well, I hope you've got good time now in your groups to look at this more, and then we're planning some question time over Zoom towards the end of the evening as well, so you might like to prepare some questions. Thank you very much.